Good evening, everyone. We are looking at First Kings chapter 5. And remember, we are still right at the time before the construction of the temple. We spent some time last week to look at the preparations that David had done, and we need to be amazed at the extent of the preparation that David had because Solomon was still very young. Now, when we come to chapter 5, verse 1, it begins this episode of the preparation that Solomon himself did on top of everything that David had done. There is a need to make certain requests to certain friendly parties, particularly in the north, with regards to timber. And so we begin First Kings chapter 5, verse 1. He says, and then Hiram, this is the king of Tyre. He is a Sidonian, right? From the Sidonian. And Tyre is right up north by the coast. And the king of Tyre, in his domain or in his kingdom, has a forest as well. The king of Tyre sent his servants, and remember the word sent, or and right here is shalach. It is always to send, to represent. And so the servants or his servants uh, was sent to Solomon. And the intent is that the servants themselves represents the king of Tyre, right? This is how we need to understand. Every time you see the word send, this is what it means, especially within the biblical narratives. If Solomon were to send servants or David were to send servants, and now the king of Tyre sending his servants, it is always with the intent to represent the king or represent the one who sent the servants. Now, this is a very ancient concept, particularly in the ancient days when an emperor sends messengers to another person or another party. This is to allow the servants to speak on behalf of the emperor. And so this is what it's meant, that the servants of Hiram, the king of Tyre, were sent to Solomon when he heard that they had anointed him king in place of his father. For Hiram has always been a friend of David. Now, this understanding in verse 1 has always been a friend, needs a little bit of expression. The expression here is, um, how should we say? He, let's see, let me just give you the translation. Just a moment. All right. Well, this word is Hiram had, uh, that Hiram has always been, this word here, a friend, loving of David, right? Loving of David. Uh, I guess you can say uh, one who loves David, right? So Hiram is always loving of David. That's the translation. The word friend does not appear. And it is a translation challenge. Um, and this word also means that he has been uh, always. Always means all the days, right? All the days. been loving David. And so Hiram and David were very good friends, that's true. But this idea of loving David, and loving is about giving. Anything that David wants of Hiram, Hiram has given it to David. And in 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 11, gives us a picture of the previous relationship between King Hiram and David. And King Hiram had sent not only trees and builders to build a palace for King David. And this represents the idea of love. So always remember, in the Hebrew sense of love, it gives us the connotation of the idea of giving. And it is not really an expression of an emotion in modern day terms. And so when Hiram is loving David, Hiram gave David a lot of things, including the construction of his palace. And in so doing, in verse 2, and then Solomon sent word to Hiram saying, now sending word to Hiram means to tell the messengers, the servants. And this is what Solomon says. You know that David, my father, was unable to build a house in the name of the Lord, his God, because the wars which surrounded him, until the Lord put them under the soles of his feet. Now, this whole idea needs to be understood in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 10. God had instructed that it is only at the time when God has given them rest from the enemies that God will choose a place for his house. This we have seen at the end of 2 Samuel. And this was a place on Mount Moriah. And in so doing, God had instructed that it was Solomon who was going to build his house. And so the transference of the throne had taken place because he has been anointed king. And so Hiram comes and Solomon says, guess what? I have a major task at hand, knowing that my father has passed the throne to me. There's also a task that has been entrusted to me. Verse 4. Now the Lord my God has secured me, confirmed me, right? Confirm me, settled me. This whole idea is secure me, to settle me, settle down, have rest. Have rest. And this is from enemies, because they've all been taken care of by David. From every side, means north, south, east, or west, there is no adversary or misfortune. And the word misfortune here is evil. Now recall, the idea of good and evil in Hebrew is not about moral, but it's about function. That there is nothing around Solomon in his kingdom that is doing anything that is not right towards Israel. And so evil is translated as misfortune here, but essentially you could think of it as any threats by enemies. And that would be considered ra, or evil, in the eyes of Israel. So now that there is rest, and Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 10 says exactly that. When there is rest from all your enemies. So I just remind you all, this would be Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 10. And this is the rest that is happening. Although it's translated as secure, it really means have rest. And so I intend to build a house for the name of the Lord my God. Now understand, for the name of the Lord my God, I guess you could say name is actually with reference to the character or the personality, as well as a memorial. So you can think of it to build a house for the memorial of the Lord my God, or as for the name or the character, so that people will know that God is there amongst Israel. And so to build a house is a big thing in the ancient days. And to the Israelites, they are expecting to actually have a physical presence or a more permanent presence of the presence of God. Because the Ark of the Covenant is housed under a tent. The altar is in Gibeon on a high place. And so this whole process of building a house is to establish the name of God, the Shem of God in this case, or the character, the memorial, something that everyone can recognize and know and remember. And this much is said just as God had spoken to David, my father, saying, your son, whom I will put on your throne in your place, he will build a house for my name. And that would be Solomon. Verse 6, now then, issue orders. This would be command. Now, this word here is zavot. Just a sidebar. Issue orders, a command from the, and this would be equivalent to a commandment. The verb here is zava, and it is to command. Now, these are the same words that is used when God spoke to Moses for the children of Israel, in the book of Exodus, in the book of Leviticus, in the book of Numbers, in the book of Deuteronomy. Whenever you see the word commandment, it comes from the word zavot, comes from the word zava. It is to command. And here it is translated as issue orders. And so this should give you an idea. When you don't see the word issue a commandment, it's like they would reserve the idea of commandment to God and use the word orders as if it is less severe. But the concept is the same. You see, the concept here is to place an instruction. The instruction is such that it has to be obeyed. It is a formal command that they cut cedars from Lebanon for me. That would be north of Israel. And my servants will be with your servants, and I will give you wages for your servants in accordance to all that you say. You tell me how much, I will give it to you. For you yourself know that there is no one among us who knows how to cut timber like the Sidonians. And that would be the people of Tyre. Sidonians is a cultural group of people that lives along the coast of the northern part of Israel. And so this whole idea is the request that Solomon made to the king of Tyre, Tiram, is for him to issue orders to his servants to cut timber. Verse 7, when Hiram heard these words of Solomon, meaning it should mean that the servants went back and then conveyed it to Tiram. He greatly rejoiced. Now, this is interesting. The word greatly rejoice comes from the word exaltation, uh, to be glad. He was exuberant. I guess you can call that exuberant or exuberant. This is to say that the king of Tyre, Hiram, was extremely happy, extremely cheerful, because the relationship with Israel continued. Now, I want us to be careful to look at these words here. Bless, blessed be the Lord today, who has given David a wise son over this great people. The great people is Israel, or the Israelites. And remember, this was Solomon asking for wisdom to rule over them. And so he is now recognized as a wise son. And this is seen, this is visible by Solomon's request to Hiram. Now, the reason what I wanted you to take a look here with me is this. Hiram spoke about God and blessed God today after hearing of the blessing that is upon the people of Israel. So a few things here I think we need to pay attention to. This is Hiram. Hiram is not an Israelite. He knows God. He blesses God. He knows David, right? And so if you look at these combinations of observations, you find that Hiram is one foreigner, if you want to call him a Gentile. He knows God. He knows the God of Israel. He knows him by name. This is the name of God, Yod-He Vav-He. And he blesses God today. He recognizes David. He recognizes Solomon. He recognizes Israel. And he is a friend of Israel. And from here, in that relationship with Israel, Hiram, the king of Tyre, also has peace with Israel. And in a way where no other Gentile nations had that kind of a relationship at this point in time. We read of another case when you study the book of Jonah, where Jonah was called to Nineveh, another nation that is not Israelite, and they know how to repent. And so one of the things I think I wanted to allude to all of us as we study the text like this is so that you do realize that occasionally there are Gentile kings and Gentile people who actually know God, but they do not serve God in the temple because they have no part of the temple. But they are well aware of the presence of God in Israel with his people, and they will live by themselves and they would work together and cooperate with Israel because of the knowledge of God. And verse 7 here tells us this clue concerning that relationship between Tyre and Israel. In that friendship that was extended to Solomon, in verse 8, and then Hiram sent to Solomon. This is via the servants. I suppose you call this snail mail, but it is an exchange of conversation saying this: I have heard what you have sent me. And this was the message. I will do everything you wish concerning the cedar and juniper timber. Now, this one, I think we can call this cypress. Also, a great big tree found in Lebanon. So we have two timber. One is cedar and one is cypress. Both were made planks, and then tomorrow, when we get into chapter 6, we will be able to see the construction of the temple using the wood from Lebanon. So this is a preparation for the construction of the temple. Verse 9, my servants will bring the timber down from Lebanon to the sea. And I will have them made into rafts to go by sea to the place where you direct me. And I will have them broken up there. And then the second part is, you will carry them away. Then you shall do what I wish by giving food to my household. So what does this actually mean? It means this. If this was Lebanon, and this would be Tyre, and the trees that we do know, right? The trees that we find in the place, and they are big trees. The logs themselves are going to be brought down into the sea, very much tied together. Now, you say tied together, it would be like this. And so this is what they call rafts. At least the word here. And so when it goes down south, it will go down to Israel. And what is going to happen is that they will then split it up into its individual logs. And then the people of Solomon then will bring to wherever is needed. This is what it means in verse 9. Verse 10. And then Hiram gave Solomon all he wished of the cedar, and this would be cypress timber. Verse 11, Solomon then gave Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat as food for the household, 20 cores of pure oil. This would be what called cold pressed olive oil. And this is what Solomon would give Hiram year by year. And this is an annual supply. Every time you see an annual year by year, you would know that the construction took 7 years. And a lot of requirements, right, was needed. And so there was a lot of food to feed the entire household to do this work. And so this is the exchange. Instead of paying for the logs, Solomon is paying in kind to make sure that the servants of Hiram is well taken care of to do the tasks. Verse 12, and the Lord gave wisdom to Solomon. Now understand that this idea of giving is that Solomon had what we call an acute insight. An acute insight that leads him to have knowledge, understanding, and thereby wisdom. They are all the same. So the acute insight is the ability that God gave to Solomon. Now, this would be equivalent to, say, a person who is able to play piano, and the person learns to play the piano. And so he takes courses and classes and finishes the exam. But given the particular skill level that person has, the person may not be able to achieve himself into a top-notch professional pianist. One who is specially gifted has an edge, has an added ability, which, well, in normal terms, we call a talent, a natural talent. It is not just to be able to play the piano, still have to learn, still have to go through the classes, but the achievement and the accomplishment of this talented pianist goes way, way beyond a normal person. And so when the text says God gave wisdom to Solomon, God did not zap knowledge into his mind. God just gave Solomon an acute insight. He has a very innate uh, observation skills, if you like to understand that, analytical skills, way beyond the norm. That as he looks and learns about things, he learns very fast and he can see things and gain insight beyond the norm. And that is what it means by God giving wisdom to Solomon. Knowledge was not infused into Solomon. Knowledge was learned by Solomon in a very quick way as he absorbs everything that he sees around him. Just as God had promised him, and there was peace. The idea of peace is shalom between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a covenant. This word is cut, a covenant. Uh, and some would call it a trade agreement. Doesn't matter what you call it in the modern day. In the Hebrew term, it is to cut a covenant. The two of them cut a covenant. And this would be a formal agreement. In the old days, cutting agreement would require a sacrifice of animal to be cut in two with blood. And so that terminology stuck as time went on. There was no longer the ancient Abraham days, even Moses' days. In the days of David, they still cut covenants, or the expression is still used without the killing of animals. But the effect and the understanding is that this is a very serious agreement, that anyone who breaks it could be terminated. And so this agreement is formal. Verse 13. Now, verse 13 and verse 14 gives us an idea. And then Solomon, look at this, conscripted forced laborers from all of Israel. And the forced laborers numbered 30,000 men. Now, this is an interesting idea. The idea of conscription, the idea of conscription really means to cause to go up. To cause to go up has an idea of well, I guess you can say conscripted, sign up, right? Sign up. And it's the idea of forced laborers doesn't sound very good, right? Doesn't sound very good, doesn't sound very right. But the whole idea here is these are laborers that is enlisted to work. This is not enlisting for the army. This is enlisting to work. And this is to work to build a temple. This is what it means by this concept of forced laborers. And there were 30,000 men. And so some will call it, instead of sign up, a taxation. But this idea of taxation is in kind. It is a tax such that the people are enlisted to serve Solomon to build the temple. Then he sent them to Lebanon, 10,000 a month in shifts. They were in Lebanon for a month and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the forced laborers. We saw that is in First Kings chapter 4. Now, this whole idea is this: Lebanon, 10,000 men. And then this is 1 month. And then after this 1 month, go home. 2 months. And then the next 10,000 at home, there are 30,000. The next one will go to Lebanon, and the next one. And so what happens if we go work for 1 month and go back 2 months? It is something very similar to people working on the present day oil rigs, for example. It's you can go there and work, but you just can't come back. So every day you will work, and then when it's time to take a rest, you will go home for 2 months. And so this was the arrangement of those people enlisted to work, and they are not forced to work as slaves. They are given this work, and it's not easy labor. And so there is a time to rest, recuperate, and then go work again. So people should not misunderstand this as slavery. This is really an enlisting to work to build the temple. Now, in verse 15, and then Solomon had 70,000 porters. Now, understand the word porters carry heavy burden. This is the idea. Those who lift heavy burdens. So they carry heavy things. So this is what it means by porters. They are not carrying bags. They are carrying stones, right? And then 80,000 stonemasons in the mountain. Now, besides Solomon's 3,300 chief deputies who were in charge of the project, ruled over the people who were doing work, you find that these are the ones who would, well, you've got a mountainside. Let's say this is the mountainside. You get approximately 80,000, right? 80,000 that will chisel out rocks. And then you get 70,000 that will carry the rocks. And so this is 70,000. This is 80,000. These are the people who will be shifting heavy rocks for the foundation of the temple. Verse 17, then the king issued orders. Now, verse 17, again, this word issue orders. These are commands, zava, issuing zavot. And these are commandments. Now, the reason why I want to highlight this to you is that these are not options, right? This is not options. Just like when you tell your children to do certain things, it is a zava. It is the issue of commandment. It is not an option for your child to disobey. It is an option for your child to do what he is told. And so the king issuing orders is to these people beyond that 30,000 that went up to Lebanon. There were 70,000 here at the rocks, heavy mountains, 80,000 to chisel them out. Then you've got people who rule over them. And there's a lot of people doing work. There's way over 100,000 people. They quarried, large stones, valuable stones, and to lay the foundation of the house with cut stones. And this is to lay the foundation for the temple. In our last verse, it says, and then Solomon's builders, these are Israelites, Hiram builders, these are from the Sidonians from Tyre. And then you get this Givlim. Givlim comes from the word uh, Gival, Givli, and they are also from the place of Geval. They are also non-Israelites. They are also Gentiles. They were the ones who cut the stones. They prepared the timber and the stones to build the house. It is interesting that the people who prepared all these, Solomon's builders, Hiram's builders, the Gavali, they are the ones who did the work to build the temple. These were the best people for the job. And Solomon found the best people to do what they do best. As Hiram has built the palace of David, and they have seen the work, and it's renowned. The piece with Hiram is that he knows God, and so he participates in this building as well. And so this is the beginning of the preparation to the construction of the temple, which we will look at tomorrow. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.